Part of the review of any internal process does look at the history of the officers, and that'll be part of this total review of their conduct on this day. But we were not reopening any previous investigations at this time.
I have a question that the IAM representatives might be best suited to answer. I noticed that in the executive summary, it said that forensic evidence and officer statements were considered. Now, and we know that there have been some conflicting statements from other witnesses. Were there any of their witness statements taken into account?
What I can tell you is that the report declares, and I don't think I'm stealing any thunder from our consultants, is that they had the records, and it's described in the report. They had the records available, but they didn't conduct any independent interviews for a number of reasons. But the issue is that there are limitations to the report because, among other things, they were unable, because of the timing of issues, to interview the officers involved in the matter. And so the report is what it is. It is an administrative review of the matter. It's not intended to be the full, complete investigation. It does point us in the right direction. Part of what the chief mentioned about our administrative review process needing to be strengthened. This is a roadmap and a template for how you conduct a full, thorough, and complete internal review of an officer-involved shooting, and we've followed those elements of the report in the execution of our internal investigation. I just want to mention that our internal investigations have timelines that are pursuant to contract. Those timelines of the completion of the investigation will run out next week. There's a period of time of 3 weeks, 21 days, where the chief has the ability to discuss with his command staff and perhaps the officers involved and their representatives what the ultimate outcome of the investigation and any possible discipline or correction might be. At the conclusion of all that, we'll be in a position to describe what the final outcome of that disciplinary action, if any, has been. So between now and then, we're going to leave comments regarding that to that point in time and not discuss it further here today.
Chief, what responsibility do you take for the confusion and lack of coordination at the daycare center that day?
Well, I'm chief of police and I take full responsibility of the entire department. We're going to look at the 27 recommendations, have a working group, and go through each one of those and see if we can make some sort of improvement with each one of those.
Reaction to the dispatch that seemed to have a problem nailing down that location to provide backup for these officers. Your reaction to that, and also what kind of action or what's happening to make sure that, that's a fundamental, basic mistake.
One thing I just want to make sure everybody understands at the outset to answer that question. Dispatch of the 911 center is not managed by the police department.
No,
it's managed, I'm going to finish, it's managed by 911, which is comes under the leadership of the fire chief. Mr. Hayes can talk a little bit about the procedures that the fire department went through in terms of reviewing from their end, and the chief can talk a little bit about what the recommendations in the report are and what they mean to the department in terms of making sure the left hand and the right hand are on the same page. Chief, I don't know if you want to talk about that from your end.
That was one of the recommendations, is the 911 communication. So again, placing a working group together and taking a look at the protocol, the events that happened that day, and see if there could be any sort of improvements.
Chief, could I get you to respond to another part of the report concerning the incident and the immediate aftermath? Despite these available opportunities, there is no evidence that the officers made any effort to evacuate any of the children or adults. Instead, the officers chose to engage in a course of conduct that was extremely risky for themselves and those civilians.
Yes, that was definitely a concern that I had after the review. Hence, there's an internal investigation.
Without this review, would this internal investigation have gone forward?
Well, let me just say this. As I said before, this is a incident that's, there's a specific reason why we did what we did. The report didn't come from the Department of Justice initiation. It came from our initiation. What I can tell you is that we, as I said in the first press conference we did on this, and what we're talking about today, yeah, it was a concern to me when I saw that we had children in a basement of a church. We had an unarmed suspect who was barricaded we wanted another look at that to make sure the perspective from the leadership of the police department and the administration was in line with other practices across the country. But what I think we see is there was a good reason why people were asking those questions. There was aspects of our policies that were violated, in our opinion, which comports with the opinions presented by the consultants in the report. And that's why, again, the chief had ordered the internal investigation, which is still ongoing. And again, as Mr. Hayes said, when you start an internal investigation related to our police department union staff, that triggers a series of notice requirements and other requirements within the contract. So we're working within that structure right now.
Mayor, is there anything in the report that you disagree with, that you find either to be inaccurate or a recommendation that you just don't agree with?
I'll let the chief cover the practical aspects of it, because really what I've said, overall, we have great faith in the recommendations in general made in the report. There's a number of specific areas within the recommendations that we may have some concerns about from a practical standpoint executing, given the environment we have from a state law standpoint and from our union contractual standpoint. So, and again, Mr. Hayes is the more of the expert on it, but the idea of making sure we have accurate and valid witness statements. We can't necessarily force a witness to videotape a statement. If we want to get the statement from the witness, under Illinois law today, it's our understanding they have a right to say, I don't want it videotaped. So there's a number of very practical issues like that, which we'll have to discuss as we move forward. But by and large, most of the I agree with the recommendations that have been made. Again, there may be a few details or nuances here or there within the report, but in terms of the analysis that we had a justified shoot, I agree with that, which the grand jury also agreed with, the report agreed with, and our administration, the police administration agrees with it. And with regard to the various tactical concerns about entry and other violations of our protocol and our policies, I also agree with those conclusions.
But everything leading up to the shooting seems like a failure of community policing ideals. That's something that you want. It failed.
I talk about this vision of excellence everywhere. It's not the same as perfection. Nobody's perfect. No organization's perfect. But I give a heck of a lot of credit to our officers and our leadership at the department for committing to improve, for opening up our processes as much as just about any department I can imagine in the country, and saying we're going to become the very best. We're not going to settle for being the best in the area or the most sophisticated in Winnebago County, which I think we are. We deal with a lot of tough issues that other smaller departments just don't deal with. That being said, you could look at, and the report identifies a number of breakdowns. If one of which doesn't occur, perhaps the whole thing doesn't happen. But the ultimate reason why the event occurred, you could look at all those different things and try to say, what if, what if, what if? We have to deal with this reality, what actually happened, and how we can now move forward and improve our department and improve the community.
So ultimately,